Really excited to be here today with Tyler. Tyler is the owner of GrindTime Stump Grinding, and he's on the path to replacing his W-2 income, all with stump grinding. So really excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, excited to be here. This is awesome.
Prolific on X, formerly known as Twitter. I love the content. One of the pieces that you tweeted out is that a year ago you hadn't driven a truck before, you hadn't used a stump grinder before, you hadn't pulled a trailer, and now fast forward and you've done all of that and more. How did stump grinding get on your radar?
Yeah, that's a great question. Prolific that's a generous use of the word prolific for Twitter. But yeah, I didn't have any experience in the stump grinding industry before starting. I guess I did in high school work on a tree crew. It came across my plate, if you will, on a podcast the first time where I heard someone or having the idea. He ran a tree crew and he's like, what if I spun up a stump grinding company? And I started doing some quick research, and I actually realized that there's quite a few people in different states that do run companies completely based on stump grinding. And the beautiful thing about that is it doesn't take any licensing. There's not really any requirements. You just have to go buy a stump grinder. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it came across my radar. And started moving slowly, getting the truck, getting the trailer, renting the stump grinder to start. And it kind of took off from there.
I love it. Backing up a step, you're going in sales in a W-2, probably, making a pretty nice paycheck. Where did this desire for ownership and small business entrepreneurship come from?
Yeah. So I graduated from school about 4 years ago, went into SaaS sales, and I was making, as you mentioned, pretty good income. But through the whole time, I was just looking for my way out. I remember from the very first year when I was making some good income, I was like, I have to figure out how to replace this somehow, somewhere else. And I think where it came from, I'd never felt a great sense of control in the companies I worked for as a rep. I remember one quarter, I hit like 300% of my target. And it was awesome. Got a great check, just all the things that salespeople love. And then I remember that was a Q2. So Q2 ends in June? I remember rolling in on July, right after the 4th of July. And they were like, all right, cool. Like back to square one, but you're not going to be selling in the same area. Your area is cut in half. And you also need to sell this much more to get paid the same amount that you just got paid. And I realized that day, I was like, dude, I don't really have any control over the products that are rolled out, how good the product is, my quota, the area that I work, any of this stuff. And so I really need to figure out long-term something I can go sell, and use my skill set, but at the end of the day, have complete control over top to bottom.
That's awesome. When you think about, so you're looking for a bit more control and really being able to kind of like build something over time. What other criteria kind of attracted you to stump grinding?
To be honest, it was replacing my income. And then once I figured out how to be able to do that, I was going to leave. The big one outside of that was being able to use some of my B2B sales experience, if you will. And that's kind of how I've started scaling this company. I haven't really spent a dollar of marketing so far. Outside of a little bit on SEO, it's all been selling to tree companies and doing their stump grinding for them. And it felt very similar to what I was doing when I was, a professional in the sales world, was just reaching out to companies, email, text, call, all the things, and then building relationships and having some recurring revenue on the back end of that.
Take me through that. Stump grinding, come across this podcast, you're ready to rock. First month, if I remember correctly, you did around $9,000 in revenue. Where did that $9,000 come from?
Month one was August of 2024, and I still had my W-2 job. I heard the podcast, I think July 10th or 11th is when that podcast came out. From there to August 3rd, I did everything to get the company off the ground. Found the stump grinder rental, bought a truck, rented a trailer, website, started reaching out to companies. And I had my first services on the Saturday of August 3rd.
Wow.
And then through August, it was all from tree companies. So sub work for other tree companies is really my bread and butter. So found companies that either didn't like their sub, were renting a machine, their machine was down, whatever, and started doing work for them. And that whole month, that work was done mornings, nights, and weekends. In Utah, we have some good daylight to like 8 p.m. So I would get off work at like 3 or 4 and go and grab my grinder and go hit some stumps that whole month. Then I'd use all of Saturday as well.
That's amazing. So walk me through kind of like what the average job looks like. So it sounds like typically right now it's a tree services company that's kind of soup to nuts doing a job for a customer, and at some point you come in. How does
Yep.
that work?
Yeah, so usually, obviously, it's for removals. So when there's a stump to be dealt with, usually the tree company will hit me with a text, and then they usually know my pricing. They'll say, "Hey, here's the measurement. Here's what we're thinking on price. Does that sound good?" And then usually we agree because I've been working with the same guys now for a while. Get the job done. I usually do it, the day after they remove the tree or a couple days after, and then they pay me after the stump's done.
What goes into a quote?
Most stump grinders start pricing things by inch of diameter of the stump. So if you take an inch measurement of the diameter, the widest part of the stump, you times that by a certain dollars per inch. So here in Utah, my pricing comes in at around anywhere from like $6 to $9 per inch of diameter there. And then you'll upcharge it based on roots, access to the yard, if it has a tight side access or whatever, there's other things to upcharge there.
And from an equipment perspective, you posted some cool photos and a debate, I think, on like tracked versus wheeled grinders. What did you start with?
Yeah. So I started with actually the same machine that I own today. So I built a relationship. There's four main brands of stump grinder. Two of them have dealerships here in Utah. So those were the two that I was going to go with. And one of those dealerships was pulling a new machine into the rental fleet. It hadn't been a rental yet, but they were in the process of pulling it over. And so they're like, "Hey, you can rent this for a month from us. And if you like it, you can roll that rental price into the price of the stump grinder." So I wasn't actually losing any money by renting it for a month, as long as I was going to buy it eventually. So that's what I did. The brand's called Bandit. It's a 50 horsepower machine. It's on wheels. In the future, I will have a bigger grinder. But even that one, these are expensive machines. That was like 55 grand. So probably the
No
most
way.
expensive thing I've ever bought outside of my house, and didn't buy that in cash. That was on a loan, of course, but
Yeah, that makes sense. I imagine you got a trailer then to lug it around as well.
I did. Yeah. My first month, I just rented one from Facebook Marketplace for like $800 for the month. And then after that first month I bought. So, yeah, the trailer was like, it's a dump trailer. So I can haul chips and do some of that when needed. And it's about, I think it was like 10 grand.
What happens after that? So are you getting paid the same day, and then are you responsible for disposing the product?
So usually for most jobs, industry standard is called grind and go. So you leave like the pile of chips in the yard, and you can usually sell it to customers in the sense that like tell them like, "Hey, you can use this in your mulch beds," or this is really good organic material, and it is. And they could just use it in their yard. So that's standard. If I'm hauling the chips, I'll usually like almost double the quote just because it takes a lot more time to do that and a lot more effort, shoveling, wheelbarrowing, all that good stuff. So that's usually how we do it. Paid right after. Sometimes I'm paid by the tree company. Sometimes I'm paid by the customer. That just depends on the company. And then, yeah, then we're out of there. So if I need to haul the chips, we'll do that too.
Okay. And from a staffing perspective, would you typically put kind of one person on each crew, so to speak, or set of machinery?
Yeah, so one guy can run a truck trailer stump grinder setup. If it was a crew doing like heavy amounts of shoveling and removal of material, you might want two guys. But for the most part, yeah, one guy can run a truck trailer stump grinder.
And I noticed you invested a decent amount in brand, at least compared to
Yeah.
your average small business that you see. What are your plans? Do you want to ultimately expand, territories and kind of like franchise it or something like that? Or is the goal more so to stay within Utah and add on other services?
Yeah, I wish I knew that answer, to be honest. I feel like the brand has been great. Like people love my business cards. They love I've gotten quite a few calls from my truck decals, and I've only had those for, a week or two. But in the future, I think moving into other services is what I'm most interested in. Keeping stump grinding around, but there's some stuff that's similar with, land clearing or some of those uh industries that require heavy equipment and less human capital. I like kind of that business model. I don't want to have full crews of guys. I would rather have expensive machines with less guys. I think it's less headache, but
Yeah.
teach their own on that.
What has been the craziest story 6 months in of just like classic small business shit show?
There's a few, but the one that was probably the biggest nightmare was we were doing a stump grinding job at a big like townhome complex, and it was through their HOA, and they had this big old stump in one of the grass areas. And I told the tree guy that I was working under wanted me to get all the roots out, and I told him, I was like, dude, we're gonna hit a sprinkler line, if we get all these roots out. And he was like, yeah, let's just do it. We'll cover it after, whatever. So we're going, and sure enough, like halfway through one of the big roots that's running, these are like 20-foot roots. We are going and we hit a sprinkler line, and we're on the side that's like pretty close to one of the townhomes, and water just starts like it had some
No
water
way.
pressure, starts spraying into the window, and the window is cracked a little bit. So yeah, the water just starts coming into the townhome. I have to like slam on the door. I'm freaking out, get the person to close the window. Luckily it wasn't anything crazy damage wise. Like there was just some water on the floor. Help them towel that up. But in the meantime, there's still just water just shooting. We couldn't find the sprinkler shut off. It was a nightmare. And of course, the contractor, this is one of my first times working with this guy. He turned on me and made me cover the whole thing, which was so
No
annoying because I
way.
told him beforehand. But yeah, that was probably the worst day of, I remember just being covered, mud, grass, water, just trying to stop the sprinkler from flooding like the whole townhome complex. But
That is
yeah, that's the worst
nuts,
day.
man.
Yeah,
And
that
when you
was
think about,
not super fun.
yeah, now that you're in the business, what would you say is the secret to success, or is it obvious to someone from the outside in of what really makes a great stump grinding business?
I think with anything, I think we overanalyze things like a lot. Like you think there's some like secret sauce to success for like any business model. And I did this
Sure.
for years before I ever like got out of my W-2. It was like I was like, oh, I need to know this, or I need to have some course that teaches me that, or whatever. Really, like I knew enough to be semi-dangerous at stump grinding. To start, I by the way, not semi-dangerous. I knew enough to get some stump jobs. That's really all I knew. And then, I got the rental and figured out how to work that machine from a YouTube video. And then you figured out how to drive a trailer from a YouTube video. And like my first day, I remember one of the stumps that I did took me like 3 or 4 hours. And that stump today would take me 30 minutes. So there's not, it wasn't like pretty. But then I
Sure.
remember like day 2 or 3, like thinking like, I pretty much know how to do this pretty well now. And it just you slowly get better and better. And there was not any secret sauce at all. It was just finally choosing something and like kind of running with it, when the years before I just had cold feet on everything. So
That's awesome. In stump grinding, is it common for you to essentially be subcontractor and doing this B2B sales motion to tree services, or is there a world where you would go direct to customer?
I'm working on direct to customer. So already I'm starting to get some more organic stuff through the little bit of SEO that I've done and like collecting reviews. I have like 50 something 5-star reviews. So I'm starting to get a few organic calls a month, which is awesome. I get a few calls from my truck and trailer wrap a month. And then hopefully I'm working on which way to go with a few paid ads, whether it's Facebook ads or a few different things. When they find out there's an option for them to get that removed, usually it's like a no brainer, but it's
Oh
just
yeah,
getting in front of them and letting them know that, you can do that. Some of them wouldn't even know like stump grinding as like a title. They wouldn't know to
sure.
search that in a search.
Makes sense. We catch up this time next year. Where do you want to be?
Good question. This time next year, my goal is to do 200K in revenue this year. So I did 70K in the first 6 months. Felt like that would be a good push goal because that would put me at 140 if I just stayed on the same run rate. So 200K in revenue. And then hopefully by this time next year can make a real educated decision on what the future looks like, how big you can grow something like this in a specific market. I just don't have the answers to those things when people ask me. So that's
Yeah.
what I want clarity on, is like, how hard can I push and how far can this go?
And if people have a stump in Utah that needs to be removed, where can they find you?
GrindTime Stump Grinding on Google. If you want really useless facts that won't change your day to day about stump grinding, follow me at Stump Guy Ty on X. And then, yeah, that's all I do is tweet about stump grinding. So
Awesome.